Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Nazir daf tet. We are beginning the second chapter. We'll begin at the top of daf tet, and let me share my screen. This perek is going to continue with mostly the same topics that we saw in the first perek. Now, on some level, it's the reverse. At least that's what we're about to begin with. In particular, we talked about the case where somebody says, I'm going to be a Nazir that is prohibited from, let's say, grapes or grape seeds, meaning that they're not going to be prohibited from wine or anything else. That the point is that they're not going to have all the other prohibitions. And what did we see? We saw that, in fact, that Nazir ends up being a Nazir according to the opinion that we saw in the Mishnah. We saw that there's actually Rabbi Shimon disagreed, but that wasn't actually cited in our Mishnah. But the point is that was the position that we saw during the first perek, that if you do you try to do a partial Nazir, I want to be a Nazir just with respect to one item that of the prohibitions, with respect to not cutting one's hair, but not with respect to anything else, that is not going to work. You are a Nazir. The only possible exception is if you were to say that you wanted to be a Nazir Shimshon, and then you would have all the rules of Nazirut without the rules associated with becoming Tameh, but that's not the same thing as saying that, I want to have, to be a traditional Nazir with those same rules. That would not be possible. So the point is that that's one direction. So what happens if instead one were to say they want to be a Nazir in connection with figs? That's what we're going to talk about this morning. So, Hareini Nazir min hagrogros min hadvela. If somebody says that they want to be a Nazir in connection with dried figs or in connection with pressed figs, so what happens? So, Beis Shammai omrim Nazir. Beis Shammai says that the person is going to be a Nazir. Beit Hillel omrim eino Nazir, and Beit Hillel says he's not a Nazir. Okay, so that is the main machlokus. But now Rabbi Yehuda comes and qualifies and says something different. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Av Kisha Amru Beit Shammai. When Beit Shammai said that something works, Lo Amru Ela Ba'omer Harei Hein Alai Korban. That it's only as if somebody were to say that it should be for me, on me like a korban, meaning that when one says Hareini Nazir min hagrogros, they are really saying that grogros grogros alai korban, that the grogos should be to me like a korban. And so as a result, what according to Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Shammai is really saying is they are saying that this is in fact one has made effectively a neder against grogros or dvela. And so if we take a look at the second Tosfos here, so Amar Rabbi Yehuda Avkish Amru Beit Shammai Lo Amru Ella Ba'omer Harei Alai Korban. So Rabbi Yehuda Palig Atana Demasnisen, that he's disagreeing with the person who taught our Mishnah, who taught that Beit Shammai was saying that the person was a Nazir. Aliba de Beit Shammai, and he's arguing in connection with what Beit Shammai says. The Ka'amar, and he's saying, do lo having Nazir ledin Nazirut. He doesn't become a Nazir qua Nazir. Kevan de lo nadar me'asher yotze migefen hayayin, because he did not prohibit for himself things that are products of grapes, like wine. Ella nadur havi min hagrogros, but min hadvela, but rather he was referencing figs, whether it's dried figs or pressed figs. Ki'ilu amar harei hein alai korban, and it's like he said that they're on me like a korban. And so as a result, just as we saw in Maseches Nedarim, that if somebody were to say harei hein alai korban, that whatever object the person's referring to is considered prohibited like a korban, so too here the grogros are going to be considered prohibited like a korban. Tomer, 1 second, you probably all have a perfect memory that Tosos has, which I did not have. Vaha ihu nazir ka'amar ve'ech yeh nazir. So he's going to ask, actually, first question he's asking is, I don't understand, the person said nazir, and how could we understand nazir to mean something else? Yeshlomer, the Nazir Lashon Hafrasha, that really the language of Nazir is just a language of separation. The Ki'ilu Amar Hareini Perush Min Hagrogros. And it's really that he's saying, I want to separate from Grogros. Okay, so that's how we deal with the fact that the person used the word Nazir. V'im Tomer v'ha b'nedarim muchach l'Rebbe Yehuda the Amar Korban lo havi neder. If you were to say that something that is that if something is a korban, that is not a neder. Lo havi neder b'korban is not it's not as if you made a neder with a korban. Ad sheyomer kik korban b'kaf. You need to actually say that it's like a korban. That you can't say that this mask is a korban. This mask is not capable of being offered as a sacrifice. And so if you say that it's like a korban, it doesn't work. If you were to say that it's like a korban, well, then it becomes prohibited to you. So I don't understand. In our Mishnah, what did Rabbi Yehuda say? He said, Harei hein alai korban. It is on me a korban. Well, I don't understand. That doesn't say kik korban. That says korban. And it seems based on our, in Maseches Nedarim, our learning at the very beginning on Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, it seems that that should be not sufficient and it shouldn't be a korban. The Yesh Lomar, and so one we can answer that Dahani Mili Kishalo Amar Alai. That what is different here is if you say Hare Zek Korban, well then you've said nothing because this thing can't be a korban. But if you say Hare Alai Korban, then it could work because all you're saying is so Amar Alai Ella Kikar Zeh Korban. That's the problem. If you say Kikar Zeh Korban, this thing is going to be a korban, then that's not going to work. But Aval Ki Amar Kikar Zeh Alai Korban Ein Sarach Lomar Kaf. Then you won't need the letter Kaf in it. Okay, so that's how Tosfos understands it. And let's take a look at the Rush as well, as the Rush also provides some additional detail for us. So if we take a look, the Rush is on the outer edge of the page. So Amar Rebbe Yehuda, it's 4 lines down in the Rush. Amar Rebbe Yehuda, Afkisha Amru Beit Shammai, Lo Amru Ela Ba'omer Harei Hein Alai Korban, that this is going to be on me like a korban. So Dulom Nechalku Beit Shammai Beis Hillel Inyan Nazir, that actually it turns out that they're not arguing about whether or not the person becomes a Nazir. Demoda Beit Shammai Dulo having Nazir. Beit Shammai would also agree that the person doesn't become a Nazir. The lo nechlaku ela ba'omer belibi haya sheyiyeh hagrogrot alai korban. That actually what we're talking about is a situation where the person comes to us and he says that he said Hareini Nazir min agrogros. So that's what he said. And then he tells us, you know what I really meant? I meant that I didn't want to have anything to do with grogos. I find them, repulsive. I want to have nothing to do with grogos. And what I meant to say is that I want to have a neder against grogos. And so that's the truth. That's the honest truth. So Beit Shammai savre da having neder mina hagrogos. So as a result, continuing on in the Rush, the Beit Shammai says that the person has in fact made a neder against grogos. Ubeit Hill savre to lo having neder, that he has not made such a neder. The Tanakama savar. Now, so that's what Rabbi Yehuda's position is. The Tanakama savar. No, the Tanakama disagrees with respect to whether or not Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel are arguing about Nazir. Afilu im amar belibo haya have Nazir. That even if the person, according to the Tanakama version of Beit Shammai, even if the person says, this is what I had in my mind, that is the person still would be a Nazir. Kevan shahotzi Nazir mipiv, because what came out of his mouth was the word Nazir. And so as a result, when something comes out of your mouth and it's clear, we're going to follow it. The Nadar lohavi, and there would not be a neder. Apagapta amar delaha ichavin. And even though the person says that that's what I had in mind, had in mind that I would just have a neder about grogos, tough luck. The dvarim shebelev einam dvarim. That when it comes to a clear speech and a heart that says something different, the heart doesn't matter. Because he's changing what came out of his mouth. Beit Hillel lo havi lo nazir v'lo nador, and Beit Hillel would say, no, you're not a nazir, and you're not a you haven't made a neder. You haven't made you're not a nazir because as we'll see in the Gemara, because your language is not consistent. And if we focus on the end of your language, it seems clear that you're not trying to be a Nazir, and you didn't make a neder, because if we look at the beginning of your language does not fit with the end of your language. So for that reason, you would neither have made a neder or become a Nazir. Now, I will note that interestingly enough, Rambam holds like what Rabbi Yehuda says, meaning that he says that if somebody were to say Hareini Nazir min hagrogros, that he would actually say that the grogrot are prohibited to the person. Now, that would be very odd if he were to hold like Rabbi Yehuda. So it is likely that the Rambam understands Beit Hillel, and when he says that the person is not a Nazir, that he's saying he's not a Nazir, but he has made a neder. And this would help us understand why Rabbi Yehuda would need to come in. Usually people don't come in and tell us a correction about Beit Shammai. We don't paskin like Beit Shammai. But it would seem that Rabbi Yehuda is saying, no, Beit Shammai is the one who says that it's not a Nazir, but it is a neder. And Beit Hillel is the one who says it's not a Nazir and not a neder. Now, that interpretation is a little difficult as we go through the Gemara, and it doesn't seem to be consistent with Tosos or others. But in any event, that seems to be how the Rambam would understand our Mishnah. So, all right, so now that we've got the Mishnah down, so we're going to now take a look at the Gemara, and we're going to begin by explaining Beit Shammai's reasoning. So, Hareini Nazir mina grogros or mina dveila, if a person says that they are, a Nazir from grogros or from a dveila, again, dried figs or pressed figs, Beit Shammai omrim Nazir. So Beit Shammai says he's a Nazir. That's just a quote from our Mishnah. So, how do we understand? V'amai, why is that the case? Mikol asher ya'asem migefen hayayin amar Rachmana. I don't understand. The requirement to become a Nazir is about things from gefen hayayin, which again means that it from a grapevine. So I don't understand how could one become a Nazir if one's talking about figs? So Beit Shammai sabri la Rabbi Meir. Beit Shammai says, but you have to understand. Rabbi Meir teaches us an important point. Da Amar, what does Rabbi Meir say? Ein adam motzi dvarav levatala. Person doesn't say something that means nothing. So let's take a look first at the Rush again. So let's take a look at the Rush. So Rabbi Meir, it's almost basically the middle of the narrow lines in the Rush. Again, left-hand side of the page. Rabbi Meir to Amar Eina the Motzi Dvara Levatala. And so the Rush reminds us or tells us where did this come from? This is Be'erichin, Peraka Omer, Mishkali Alai. So if somebody were to say that, so in that Perek, Kam Rabbi Meir says, HaOmer Erech Klizeh. If somebody says, let's just back up and just remind ourselves certain rules of Erechin. These rules are at the end of Sefer Vayikra. And the rule is that in certain situations, if you were to say that I want to give a donation of the value of this person to the Beit HaMikdash, we would ask how much would that person get sold as a slave, and that's the amount you owe. But if you say, I want to give the erech of a person, which is a defined value that the Torah gives at the end of Sefer Vayikra, well, then you depending on the person's age and gender, those are the only two factors that will determine how much you have to give. But there is no possibility, there is no value given for a child below 30 days, and there is no value given for stuff. So what happens if you use that erech language with respect to stuff or a child under 30 days? Ha'omer erech klizem alai o erech pachot mi ben chodesh. So what happens? So then Rabbi Meir says, no saying damim, the person is required to give the value of such an individual or such a thing. Umefarish taimei, and we explain that his reasoning is mishum de'ein adam motzi dvarav levatala. People don't say things that are meaningless. So if something came out of the person's mouth, we're going to give it meaning. meaning. Yesh lanu lomar shita'a b'kasavar haya sheyesh nazir b'kahai gavna. And so in this situation, we're going to say, look, the person probably thought that you could become a nazir in this way. And so as a result, since he referenced nazir, that's clear. We're going to assume that he thought that he could be a nazir like this. And so therefore, that's why he's going to be a nazir according to Beit Shammai. Ubeit Hillel, you can keep your finger in the rush because we'll come right back to it. Ubeit Hillel Savri, La Rabbi Yossi, and Beit Hillel says, no, it's like Rabbi Yossi, to Amar, B'gemar dvarav Adam Nispas. We focus on a person's final words. What does that mean? So let's take a look again back into the rush. Gabi harezet temuras ola utemuras shlamim. What happens if one says, and we saw this, I think, during the course of our learning together of Maseches Nedarim, if there's a general rule of tamura. A tamura is that if I have a korban here, and I say, and I have another animal that's not a korban, and I say that I want to move the korban status of this animal to this animal, then both of those animals end up being the same korban required, and you have to bring both of them. Now, what happens if I actually have two korbanos that I'm required to bring, a shlamim and an ola? So if I were to say that this is a tamura for the shlamim, well, then I'm stuck with two shlamim. And if I say that this is a tamura for the ola, I'm stuck with two olas. But if I say this is a tamura for the shlamim and a tamura for the ola, what happens? So according to some people, maybe we'll say it is meaningless because you can't do that. There's no way that you can have an animal that is both a korban that's a shlamim and the korban that's an ola. But Rabbi Meir says, no, he must have had in mind to be effective. And as a result, it is going to, and let's take a look. Now we can pick up with the rush. So Gabi Harezet Tamuras Ola Tamuras Shlamim. If you say that kind of language, that it's both a replacement for an Ola and a replacement for a Shlamim, to Ka'amar Rabbi Yossi, that you have to allow it to graze until it gets a mum. And in the end, you bring half of the month, then you can sell it once it gets a mum, because that's the rule associated with the korban that has a mum. You sell it, and then you can use the proceeds to replace that korban. So you bring, and in this instance, because it is half shlamim and half ola, you're going to sell it, and then half the proceeds are used for an ola, and half the proceeds are used for a shlamim. The kaven demitchila haya bidato lomar shnehem, because he initially intended to say both things, chayil shtein, both of them apply. So hachanami mitchila hayadaito lamar harein nazir min agrogos. That we're going to understand that from the very beginning, the person intended to say that I want to be a nazir from grogros, and so based on this, we're going to say that nothing applies. Now, you may wonder, I don't understand, David. How could you say that nothing applies? The whole case of Tamura shows that both things apply. Well, that's a great question, and you're not the only one to have thought of it. And indeed, Tosfos asked that question. And so if we go, if the last word on the line of the Tosfos is Vav Aleph double hyphen Tuf, and the Im Tomer, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down. I think I counted that right. No, 8 lines down in the medium wide lines of Tosos. In Tosos, Ein Adam Motzi Dvarav Levatala. The Im Tomer, V'ha'amar Rabbi Yossi B'gemar Dvarav Adam Nispas. That 1 second. Rabbi Yossi says that in the end, the last words matter. Havi perish af begemar dvarav, meaning also the last words matter. Adam nispas, v'havi tamura ola utamura shlamim. It ends up being a both. We don't say that the person is just the shlamim. We say that it's both a tamura ola and a tamura shlamim. So how could you say in our instance that nothing happens? We should actually say that the person should be v'haki nami nispas lashon rishon nami de ka'amar nazir v'yet nazir miyayin v'nazir min agrogos. Why not say both? Say that in this instance, the way to apply Rabbi Yossi, if you're going to say Beis Hillel is like Rabbi Yossi, say that Beis Hillel should say that the person ends up being both a Nazir and a another mina grogros, and has made a neder to prohibit grogros. So Tosfos answers, that here's the story in Tamura. Where it's absolutely impossible, and you can't say that the end is coming to explain the beginning of his words, kasi hilkach chayle beis halashanos. Then you have to say that both apply. Meaning, you cannot say when a person says Tamuras Ola Tamuras Shlamim, you can't say that the Shlamim somehow modifies the Ola, or that the Ola somehow modifies the Shlamim. That just doesn't work. Those are, no matter how you read it, they are contradictory. L'Rebbe Yossi. And so therefore, Rebbe Yossi, therefore you're going to apply both of them. V'havi Tamuras Ola u Tamuras Shlamim. And so it's going to be both. Aval b'masnisin, but in our Mishnah, ikalamemer to sefer lepirushe reisha, that you can say that the end comes to modify the beginning. Kilomar, haide ka'amar Nazir, lav miyayin ka'amar, elamigrogros. And that the whole point of saying Nazir is not that the person is trying to separate from wine and becoming a Nazir, but rather he's trying to separate from grogos. V'hilkach gemar dvarav ikar, and therefore the final words are what matters. Hain, litvas behain, because one grabs onto the other. Below betchilas dvarav, and we're not going to grab onto the beginning words. We're going to focus on the end of what he says. And so that is how Tosfos helps us understand that even though Rebbe Yossi in Tamura seems to apply both, he would not necessarily apply both in this situation. He would say that the latter comment of grogros modifies the definition of Nazir. Well, one second, if that's true, and now we go back into the Gemara, and then we ask the good question, V'hai neder upischo imohu. Well, one second. So, I'm sorry. V'hai neder upischo imo. And so, as a result, what is this? What is this like? It's like the person made a neder. He tried to become a Nazir, but at the same time that he was trying to become a Nazir, pitcho imo, he created an opening to annul the vow because he thought that he was talking about grogros, and obviously that's a mistake. And so, as a mistake, it shows that the vow can be annulled from the very beginning. So Ella, so Ubeit Shammai nami neder ufitcho imo. Well, one second, Beit Shammai also says, would potentially have this principle. Why not say for them as well that this is a neder, meaning that you made a Nazir neder, but then you created an opening because obviously you had a mistake in what you were thinking. So Ella Beit Shammai Sabri like Rabbi Meir. Beit Shammai holds like Rabbi Meir. Da Amar Ein Adam Motzi Dvarav Levatala. Again, person cannot doesn't say something for nothing. The Kavan Da Amar Hareini Nazir. And since the person said Hareini Nazir, Havalei Nazir, he's going to become a Nazir. And Kika Amar Mina Grogos Mina Dvela. And so why did he say that? He wanted to, we're going to assume that he was trying to rescind, and therefore what? Uvei Shammai l'tamayu, and Beit Shammai is consistent with their position, with their reasoning. To Amri ein she'ela behektish, because you cannot ask to undo hektish. You can't say that you're going to consecrate an animal and then say, you know what? I want to ask a rabbi to annul my consecration, because in that situation there's no annulling possible. The kavan to ein she'ela behektish, and just as there's no annulling when it comes to hektish, ein she'ela benazirus. There's no possible annulling when it comes to nazirus. One can understand that the point is that here the person is on some level becoming holy, he's consecrating himself, or one can say that he's promising to make karbanos at the end of the day, and so as a result, there's not a possibility to undo that vow. And why doesn't Beis Hillel say that? Why does Beis Hillel allow annulling? And it's interesting, right? One could ask, why don't we just say that Beis Hillel doesn't agree with that, and so that's sufficient? Ubeit Hillel sabri ka Rabbi Shimon, but we're going to add something more. Beis Hillel thinks like Rabbi Shimon. Ditnan, and that now this is going to be, and we're going to learn this in more detail in a moment, that we're going to see the source of this Mishnah that we're now quoting. Because what does Rabbi Shimon say? Rabbi Shimon Poter. Rabbi Shimon says that a person is exempt. This is a situation where somebody says that they want to bring a mincha offering from barley, which is not possible because a mincha offering, a voluntary mincha offering, is from wheat only. And so Rabbi Shimon says the person is exempt. Shelo hisnadev kiderech hamisnadim, because you use the wrong language. And so according to Rabbi Shimon, if you use the wrong language, it's not possible. And this explains, if we go back to Tosos, remember Tosos was explaining that according to Beit Hillel, that we're going to say we're going to focus only on the end of his language based on Rebbe Yossi. So, and yet, why don't we say that the person has therefore made a neder against grogros? The answer to why he hasn't made a neder against grogros is because Beit Hillel holds like Rebbe Shimon, which is that if you don't use the right language, if you try to make a neder using the language of Nazir, you have done nothing. And so as a result, we're going to focus on the end of the comments, and we're therefore going to, it will be fine. So let's take a look first at the Rush and then at Tosos, bottom line of each. So first, Ubeit Hill, Savri Karebi Shimon. And again, the Rush helps us out and tells us what we're talking about. Gabe harei alai mincha min hasorim. If somebody were to say, I want to bring a mincha from barley, to ka'amar, if he says that poter, that Rabbi Shimon says that is poter, the person is not obligated. Shelo hisnadim kederach hamisnadim, because the person did not make the neder in the right language, did not make the promise in the right language. So hakanami. So here too, as we turn over the page to Tedam Abet in the top of the Rush in the right-hand column, lo nader kederach hanodrim. The person did not make a neder the way a person makes a neder. She'ein nazar min agrogros. So therefore, because you can't say the word nazar min agrogros, that's not the right language. So that is the Rush explaining why how we've said that. And so, now into Tosos, and again, the beginning of this is going to be a little repetitive. So, again, last line of Tosos, back on Tedam at Aleph. L'kaman Maisi Plukta, we're going to bring later on this argument. Harei alai mincha min hasorim, as we're going to quote it in a moment. Yevi min hachitin. So then he still has to bring from the chitin. But Rabbi Shimon, and that's the Tanakama's position that we're going to see, but Rabbi Shimon disagrees, and we pick up at the top of Tedam Abet, Rabbi Shimon Poter. He says, no, you're not obligated to bring a carbon mincha from wheat if you say that you wanted to bring a carbon mincha from barley, because you use the wrong language. V'im tomar lama hutzrach lomar Beit Hillel k'Rebbe Shimon. Why did we need to bother with this whole thing? Lema Beit Hillel l'taimayu de'amri yesh she'ela lehektish. Why not just say that there is the opportunity to ask to annul a hektish point? And that is what he holds, and that is in fact how we hold. V'yesh lomer mishum de'akasi leBeit Hillel nehi de'nazar miyayin. Lo havi nader mia lihavi min hagrogos, because one could ask, fine that he's not a nazir, but why isn't he considered a menuder min hagrogos? Why isn't he considered one who made a vow to prohibit grogos, to prohibit dry figs? Lahachi kamar ke Rabbi Shimon, and that is why he needs to tell us that he's like Rabbi Shimon, depoter legamri, and that is because in the end, Beit Hillel says he's completely exempt. Shelo hisnadev kederach hamisnadvim, that because he has not made the promise in the manner that one makes promises. So she'im baliyos nader min hagros, because if he wanted to be prohibited from eating grogros, havalei lememar b'lashon konam kederach hanodrim, he should have said it using the language of konam, like we see is the language of neder. So as a result, that's why it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so therefore, we've now got a good understanding of these two opinions. But you know what? Surprise, surprise, there are more opinions in the machlokes between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel. And so now we're going
Before you go on?
Yeah.
So the citations that you quoted from the Rosh are of Erican and Tamura.
Yep.
Are actually right in the text of the Gemara in the Yerushalmi.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
we're we're about to see actually in our text, we're going to have the language from Tamura. The language from not Tamura, the language from the language in connection with Rabbi Shimon. That's what we're about to quote. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes. So
Yes,
yes,
and
those two are not quoted here. Correct.
and the discussion in Menachot about the barley,
that's what we're going to quote, right?
That's in the Yerushalmi. That's actually an Amoraic dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish.
Really?
Yeah.
Who says what in that dispute?
Oh, let me look it up. Hold on.
Okay.
I think they actually aren't. I think they actually aren't sure, and they end up reversing it.
Ah, okay. Well, that I always like to say that I usually think that Reish Lakish has the better side of the argument, even though we poskin like Rabbi.
We usually poskin according to Rabbi Yochanan.
Exactly. All right. Anyway, so I'll continue and without going too fast, and you'll chime in when you come to the point. So all right. So Masnisen Deloka Haitana. Our Mishnah is not like the following Tanya because we have a Brisa that has the machlokus between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel slightly different. Again, in our Mishnah, we had two versions of the machlokus. We had the first version is that they argue about whether the person's a Nazir. The second version is no, they argue about whether the person has made a neder, but they agree that the person is not made a Nazir, is not a Nazir. So now we have the Tanya Rebbe Natan Omer, Beis Shammai Omrim Nadur Vin Nazir. Beis Shammai says that he's here it should be Vin Nazir. The vav is actually an or, and we need thankfully the Rush tells us that. So if we take a look at the top Rush, 3 lines down in the Rush on Ted Amabet, Perish Nadur O Nazir Im Amar Lo Haya Belibi. Right. So he's either a neder or a Nazir. So if he says Im Amar Lo Haya Belibi L'Nazirus Elishia Yehu Alai Korban, that my intention was really about prohibiting gross, well then Harei Nader, then the person would be a Nader. But the Im Lo Amar Klum, if he doesn't say anything, or of course if he says that his intention was to be a Nazir, well then having Nazir Desavar Rabbi Meir, because again Vik Rabbi Yehuda, that he thinks like Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, meaning he thinks like Rabbi Meir that a person doesn't say something for nothing, and he thinks like Rabbi Yehuda that if the person actually intended to be a korban, so to prohibit gross, well then using the language of Nazir can be okay to effectuate that. And so as a result, in this, we're going to see that Beit Shammai would say, like both Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Hillel omrim nadur ve'ein nazir. No, Beit Hillel says no. He could be a nadur, but he cannot be a nazir. Meaning that if, in fact, the person says that I had intention to prohibit gross from myself, well, then he would be a nadur. He would be bound by a neder, but he would not. But under no circumstances can he be a nazir because he's not using the right language. So Beit Shammai sabri like Rabbi Meir, but Rabbi Yehuda. Beit Shammai holds like Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir because he's focused on the fact that he says something means something. It has to mean some kind of prohibition. And like Rabbi Yehuda, because if the person intended the word Nazir to prohibit as a neder, we're going to allow that to hold. Beit Hillel sabri la Rabbi Yossi, and Beit Hillel says no, we're like Rabbi Yossi. Meaning, we're like Rabbi Yossi, that we focus only on the end of what the person said, and not like Rabbi Shimon. And so as a result, because Beis Hillel holds only like Rabbi Yossi, if the person actually intended to make a neder, we will allow that neder to take effect. Okay, so that's one possibility. Lishna Achrina Amrila. Other people said that Rabbi Nassan's that the brisa with Rabbi Nassan is actually as follows: Rabbi Nassan Omer Beit Shammai Omrim Nadur ve'eno Nazir, that he's made a neder, but he's not a Nazir. That is exactly that is very much like what Rabbi Yehuda says in our Mishnah. Beit Hillel Omrim Lo Nadur ve'lo Nazir, and that is like, again, what Rabbi, the way the machlokas would be according to Rabbi Yehuda. So this is the same as Rabbi Yehuda, but we had so now we have 3 different views of this machlokas that we had in our Mishnah. We have view number one, that it's actually about Nazir and nothing to do with Neder. We have view number two, that it's actually about Neder and nothing to do with Nazir. And we have view number three, which actually Beit Shammai says it could be either a Neder or a Nazir. And Beit Hillel says, no, it's only potentially a Neder, but not definitely. Okay, so that's, and again, according to the second view, Beit Shammai Rabbi Yehuda, Beit Hillel Rabbi Shimon. Beit Shammai would be like Rabbi Yehuda, as we had in our Mishnah, and Beit Hillel would be like Rabbi Shimon, as we saw in the Gemara. All right, so that is that. And now that we've cited Rabbi Shimon, so we're now going to quote the Mishnah in Menachos that taught in which Rabbi Shimon has his statement. And so we're gonna, in sum, we're going to show that the Tanna Kama says if you use the wrong language, it's gonna count, meaning that we'll say you're obligated to something. And according to again Rabbi Shimon, if you use the wrong language, you haven't done anything. So Tanan Hasam Ha'omer Alai Ha'omer Harei Alai Mincha Lahavi Minas Orim. If somebody says they're going to bring a mincha from barley, which again is not possible, Yavim Mincha Chitim, he's obligated to bring a mincha offering from wheat. Kemach, if he just says regular flour, Yavi Solas, he still needs to bring the good flour. Shalo b'shem uvona. If he says he's not going to bring it with the oil and the lavona, he's tough luck. Yaviena b'shem and lavona. He has to bring it. Chatzi isaron. If he says he's going to bring half the volume that he's supposed to, tough luck. Yavi isaron shalem. He has to bring the full amount. Isaron umechta. If he says he's going to bring 1.5 times the amount he's supposed to, tough luck. Yavi shnayim. He can't just bring. You can't cut it down. He's essentially obligating himself to bring two of the units. And Rabbi Shimon poter, in all of these cases, Rabbi Shimon says that the person is poter because shalo hisnadav kederach hamisnadvim. People know what the language you're supposed to use. This person didn't use that right language, and so as a result, that's going to be a problem. So Montana, who is the first opinion? Who says that that who says that if you say that you're going to bring from barley, then you have to bring from wheat. So we're going to see two views on that. So Chizkiah says, Amr Chizkiah, the machlokas shenuyu beit Shammai. It's just like our machlokas in our Mishnah. Again, what do we say in Menachos? In Menachos, we say if you use the Tanna Kama is if you use the wrong language, you're chayiv, and if you and the Rabbi Shimon position is if you use the wrong language, you're not chayiv. What about our Mishnah? In our Mishnah, the beginning of our Mishnah says that according to Beit Shammai, if you use the wrong language, you are a Nazir. And Beit Hillel says if you use the wrong language, you're not a Nazir. That seems to line up perfectly. So the machlokas shnuya uBeit Shammai. So the machlokas is what we talked about, and it's just like Beit Shammai. Lav amru Beit Shammai ki amr min agrogros umina dveila havein nazir. That if a person tries to avoid being a nazir from figs, whether dried figs or pressed figs, he's a nazir. So hachanami ki amr min saorim. Same here. When he says that he's prohibiting saorim, maybe minachitim he should bring from wheat. So Rabbi Yochanan disagrees and says, no, it could even be Beis Hillel in the Tanna Kama in the Mishnah in Menachos. Afilu teimen divrei hakol. You could say it's anybody. But Omer ilu hayisi yodea she'ein no drinkach. Because when in connection with when in Menachos, the person might have thought that he could do it. So lo nadarti kach elakach. Right. So if I would have known that because I thought that I could bring barley, if I would have known, I would have brought wheat. And so as a result, Beit Hillel could accept this explanation. And so the point is that Beit Hillel says in our case, nobody would think that when you say Nazir min agrogros, you mean to be a Nazir. But when it comes to Menachos, when it comes to bringing the mincha, a person could say that they want to bring a mincha from saorim, from barley, think that that would be possible. Turns out that it's not possible. And the person's real intention was that I want to bring a mincha. And so as a result, we're going to say that that was his intention. So Amar Chizkiya lo shanu ela she'amar min hasorim. So Chizkiya says that actually when we say the Mishnah in Menachos, it is only true with respect to Seorim, if you say barley, because there are barley mincha offerings. You can't volunteer to offer one, but there are such offerings. Aval Amar minha adashim, if you were to say that you're bringing from lentils, that's not going to work. Lo maisi v'lo klum, then you don't have to do anything. Mikti Chizkiya Keman Mokim la Masnisin. So in second, who did Chizkiya say that the Mishnah in Menachos is like Beis Shammai? It's like Beis Shammai. Well, 1 second. You're going to tell me that the reason that if you were to say a dashim, you don't have to bring a mincha is because it's totally irrelevant to a mincha, because nobody would ever think that lentils would be a proper method of bringing a mincha offering, because a mincha offering is from some kind of flour. So could grow grows lagabi nazir dummy. But that's just like a nazir in connection with figs. Everybody knows that, just as everybody knows that lentils don't have anything to do with mincha, figs have nothing to do with nazir. So Amri Beit Shammai having nazir, and yet Beit Shammai says that the person is a nazir. So Hadar Beit Chizkiya, Chizkiya must have retracted his original position that he did. In fact, he does not say that our Tanakama in our Mishnah follows Beit Shammai according to our Tanakama of our Mishnah. Well, why did he retract? So Amarava Masnisin Kshite, that the Mishnah there posed a problem for him. So my area, Tanya Min HaSeorim, why did the Mishnah specifically talk about Seorim? Listening Min HaAdashim, it should have taught about lentils, meaning if in fact it was true that if you say lentils, that you're bringing a mincha from lentils, you have to bring a mincha from wheat. Well, that would be a bigger chiddush according to Chizkiya. And so given the fact that the Mishnah didn't choose to tell us that, must be that it's not true. So Ela Sabra Chizkiya, Ki Ka'amra Beit Shammai Hasam, Ki Rebbe Yehuda. So it must be that it's Rebbe Yehuda's version of Beit Shammai. Meaning, what is a Rebbe Yehuda's version of Beit Shammai? The person is not a Nazir, but he did make a neder. And so to here, the point is that if you use the right language, if you use barley language, so then it's the right ballpark. So we're going to say that you intend to bring a mincha offering and you just have to bring it from wheat. But if you say lentils, well, then you've totally used the wrong language. And just as in our Mishnah here, Rebbe Yehuda says, according to Beit Shammai, that you don't become a Nazir and you only become a Nadur. So too there, there's no application of a neder, and so as a result, you're just not obligated to bring the mincha offering at all. For Rabbi Yochanan Amar, and Rabbi Yochanan says, no, afilu min ha'adashim. Actually, even if you were to say lentils, you'd have to bring a mincha offering from wheat. Why? V'ha Rabbi Yochanan hu Amar, v'omer ilu hayita yodea she'ein nodrin kach lona darti kach elakach. Well, 1 second. But Rabbi Yochanan's whole logic in our Mishnah was to say that if I would have known that this didn't work, I would have said the alternative language. So how could it possibly be that Rabbi Yochanan says that a dashim should work? He could never say that. And the answer is you're right. He doesn't say it. He's saying he's saying that actually Chizkiya did not need to back off his original position. He could, in fact, say that the Mishnah over there is according to Beit Shammai, according to our Tanakama in our Mishnah. Namely, that is just like Beit Shammai saying that you're a Nazir if you say Nazir min agrogros. And why? Well, what about the fact that Mishnah talks about wheat, talks about barley, and doesn't talk about lentils? So because at my time what is the reason that you retracted? Because you said that Mishnah should have talked about lentils. Well, Dilma Lomi Bycomer. Maybe that Mishnah is structured as a not only this, but this, meaning Lomi by Kiyamar Me'adashim. Certainly it'll work if you say that from lentils, you're going to have to bring a mincha from wheat. The maisi mincha al yasa. You'll have to bring a proper mincha. The ikalamemer, but you can say the following. Mihadar hu dehadar be. That in that situation, why did the person say lentils? Because he's trying to undo his commitment. Utfos lashon rishon, and therefore, because we don't hold because Beis Shammai does not hold like Rebbe Yossi, we focus on the first language, and so therefore we're going to say the first language is what matters, and the first language is I want to bring a mincha, and so we're going to say that he has to bring a mincha. Elaki ki amar minas orim. However, when he says that he wants to bring a mincha offering from barley, well, that's not necessarily an indication of a full retraction. He's not trying to get out of it, and we say that you can't get out of it because we focus on your first words. But vadi dahaki gamer, maybe what he's really saying is the following: if I can make a mincha just like the mincha of a omer, which is a mincha made from barley, o kamincha sota, or like a mincha from a sota offering, which is also made from barley, tiktush. Well, then that's the mincha offering I want to make. Ilo, and if I can't make that, maybe I don't want to make it. Maybe that's what the person means, and we should give effect to that meaning. So kamash malan demaisim menachitim, and so therefore the Mishnah in Menachos is actually teaching us a bigger chiddush, and that bigger chiddush is that even though we could give this interpretation to what the person said and say that maybe his intention was only to bring a mincha if it was possible to bring with barley, and here maybe he really didn't. So kamash malan, no, we're going to say the Tanakama in that Mishnah, just like Beit Shammai according to the Tanakama in our Mishnah, says tough luck if you use the wrong language. One is we're going to say that you said something, so you mean something. If you say something, you must mean something. And second, we're going to focus on the beginning of your words. And so as a result, we're going to focus on the beginning of your words, and you're going to have to bring a mincha offering. So tomorrow, God willing, we'll start with we'll hear about a talking cow and a talking door. And so if you want to hear about those cases, please stay tuned to tomorrow's daf. I wish everybody a good day and look forward to our learning again tomorrow.
Thank you.
What did you find? What did you find?
I couldn't go through the deep in the time. I didn't want to. I'd have to not listen to you. So
all right, no worries. Okay, well, I'm glad that you were listening.
But it's
a wonderful day.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's no kachim in the Yerushalmi, but just as the Bavli will cover topics in
you mean kachim in Bavli
elsewhere.
You mean kachim in no, there's kachim in
there's kachim. There's no kachim in the Yerushalmi.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's no Masechtot. Just as the topics that are covered in Seder Zerayim in the Yerushalmi are covered elsewhere in the Bavli, we see something covered in Kachim in the Bavli covered elsewhere in the Yerushalmi.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting point. Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Shkach.
Yeah. All right. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Rabbi, see you tomorrow.